Some people ask, why do we have Black History Month? And I suppose the basic answer is that because of the history of the Atlantic trade, I like to call it by its polite name, the Atlantic trade, our people was taken from their land and their history was taken from them. And I am so pleased to see that Black History Month has taken over in Britain and is celebrated in all corners of Britain. And what is surprising is that there are some aspects of British history with black faces going back through the centuries. And we have a display here of various African peoples that have passed through Yorkshire, some of them as abolitionists against the slave trade, some of them as entertainers, but we have a long history in Europe which needs to be recognized not only for the future generations, but also for just history itself, because it's an injustice to teach history in schools and leave out such a large and important aspect. I've done a lot of research into slavery in Britain and Europe and, of course, the transatlantic trade. And when I was researching cotton, the history of cotton, if you read the 19th century and 20th century books, they fail to say where the cotton came from. And I find that wholly amazing, that they'll talk about the mill owners and the inventors, oh yes, and the people in the factories, yes, they suffered a little bit. But they don't tell you about who picked the cotton and what we went through. So that gives you an idea of the scale of what we have to redress, because we have to pay tribute to our ancestors, and we have to demand that their contributions to the Industrial Revolution and to the modern society we live in today, we have to make sure that, the working class and the enslaved Africans, everybody fits into that picture. We've all contributed to this world, and we all deserve equal rights and equal opportunities and justice. There are two people I want to point out on there who I spoke about last year, and one of them is Alauda Equiano. As we come up to 2007, which is the bicentenary of the abolition of the slave trade in England, so in other words, the slave trade was abolished through Parliament in 1807, but it didn't stop slavery. Slavery still continued in the Caribbean and in America. It was abolished in the Caribbean in 1838 and in America in 1861, I believe, when President Lincoln gave the Emancipation Proclamation. Alauda Equiano was born in 1745 in a village called Isaka in Nigeria. And his father was a chief. He himself would have grown up to become a judge in the village in the tradition of his ancestors of the Igbo people in Nigeria. But at the age of 10, he was kidnapped with his sister, and they were just playing not far from their home when they were grabbed and dragged away screaming, but nobody heard their screams, so nobody came to their rescue. So Alauda had to look after his sister, but he was in chains, and they were then chained to other people who had been kidnapped from their villages. And after 3 days of marching, not knowing where they were going, terrified, never being so far away from their home before, he was separated from his sister and never saw his sister again. Eventually they reached the sea, and he saw the sea for the first time, and he saw a ship for the first time. The people he was chained with were all taken inside the belly of this ship, and they were chained to each other as the ship then journeyed to America 3-month journey chained the ship. The movement of the ship, people being sick, people dying. It must have been 3 very hard months. The West Indian Centre is celebrating the Middle Passage. Celebrating the Middle Passage is probably a contradiction, but we're highlighting the Middle Passage of the transatlantic slave experience today. Last year, we looked at African history before slavery, for which there is a lot to celebrate. And next year, I believe we're looking at slavery itself, and then leading up to 2007, which is the abolition of the slave trade. Equiano was sold to a man called Captain Pascal, who then used Equiano's services on board his ship. And part of Captain Pascal's endeavors was to take part in the war with France at that time. And Equiano's job was to carry gunpowder, which was a dangerous job, as he saw some of his friends blow up as well. He was then educated, sent to London to be educated. I guess they recognized his potential. And he thought he was going to be freed because of his bravery during the war. But he was resold instead to a man called Robert King. Robert King supplied goods, food, and supplies to all the Caribbean islands. So Equiano sailed from island to island. As he did so, as his master made money, Equiano thought, well, I could make money too. And if you know anything about the Igbo people, they're masters when it comes to trade. So if one island didn't have something, he would take something from another island and sell it in that island for a profit, buy something from that island. When he went to the next island, he would sell that, make a profit, buy from that island. After 3 years of doing this, at the age of 21, he was able to purchase his freedom. His master could have taken the money and resold him to somebody else. But his master was a Quaker and he had a conscience, and he gave Equiano his freedom. Equiano then made his living at sea. He was an accomplished sailor by now, and his services were in demand. He made an extraordinary trip to the Antarctic, one of the first people to do so, and definitely, probably the first black man to do so. When he finished, he had a lot of adventures at sea as well, including being kidnapped back into slavery and then having a daring escape and becoming a sailor again. What's been omitted from the Trafalgar celebrations is the fact that on some of the ships, up to a quarter of the sailors were of African origin. Black people made their living at sea because in London at that time, the then mayor forbade black people to earn a living in London or to take part in any trade. So they had to struggle to survive. And so you had a lot of black poor people. There were a lot of American-born enslaved Africans as well, who had been freed because they fought for the British against America during the War of Independence. And they were promised their freedom, but then they were abandoned. So there were many on the streets surviving in any way possible. And I'm sure a lot of the things that we see on the streets today happened back then as well, because people were excluded from the rightful opportunities they were entitled to then as well. And that's why it's important for us to study the history and learn and understand why what is happening today is happening, instead of blaming ourselves solely. We do have a responsibility, I'm not saying we don't, but the cause of our circumstances is very deep, indeed. So Equiano came back to London and saw all this going on, and he decided he was going to fight for his people. He was part of a group called the Sons of Africa. So when the abolitionists set up in 1785, I think, Granville Sharp and Clarkson and William Wilberforce they set up in 1785. The Sons of Africa was already formed to congratulate them and say good luck, and if there's anything we can do to help, let us know. People got to know Equiano. He helped the poor people in London, and the government employed him as someone to provide food and supplies for the journey for enslaved Africans to be returned to Africa. Within a few months of working in this new job, which he was very proud of, obviously, to be working for His Majesty's government, he noticed that some of his bosses were actually taking money and supplies for the journey intended for the freed Africans. They were putting it in their own pocket. So he informed His Majesty's officials of what was going on, and they turned around and accused him of stealing, and they fired him from the job. He was very angry about this. So he decided he would let the people of Britain know how slaves were being mistreated, but also ex-slaves. And he wrote a book called, well, he had another name, I'll explain first, called Gustavus Vasa. That was his slave name. And Gustavus Vasa was a Nordic ruler. And as you know, they named slaves after rulers like Caesar or Brutus or whatever is kind of an ironic status thing. And so they called him Gustavus Vasa. So the title of his narrative is The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Lauda Equiano, or Gustavus Vasa, the African. As I said yesterday talking about it, it's a long title, but he did put a lot of work into it, so I think he deserves to have a long title. He went round Britain pretty much twice, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, selling thousands of copies of his book, and he did not die a poor man. And he came to Leeds as well. He wrote a letter to the Leeds paper thanking the people of Leeds and Yorkshire for all their good work in trying to abolish slavery. It was very much about black people and white people coming together to fight an evil. Slavery has always been with us. We hear that, oh yes, well, Africans sold Africans into slavery. Yes, but nothing touches the evil cruelties of the transatlantic trade. And people say, well, why do you still go on about it? Because some of the mental scars, some of the legacies to do with health, for example, in the Caribbean, the African diet changed completely. We've still inherited some of the health legacies that come with that, high blood pressure and many other things that we have to deal with. And so we have to look at slavery to see where these things are coming from and how best we can deal with it. Eventually, Equiano, he was a prolific writer. He wrote to all the newspapers and to all the celebrities of the time, protesting the innocence of himself in being fired from the job and the evils going on with the slave trade. And he eventually received an apology from the British government. Now, that's huge when we think about a lot of the injustices still taking place today. The fact that he won an apology, the fact that he never gave up, is a lesson to be learned there. Sadly, there was a sad ending to his life in the sense that he was married in 1792, had 2 children. Unfortunately, one of them died as a child. The other one survived and married a vicar, and she inherited something to the equivalent of £100,000 today, in today's money, from her father, which is incredible. But his wife died they got married in 1792. His wife died that's right, his first child died in 1795. His wife died in 1796, and he himself died in 1797. So I'm kind of looking into that because that's quite a dramatic end. So he actually died 10 years before the end of slavery, but he knew Wilberforce and all the other abolitionists. It was Equiano who drew Granville Sharp's attention to the slave ship Zong. The slave ship Zong was pulling into England, and they realized that they weren't going to get the money for the slaves they had on board. So in order to collect on the insurance, they threw hundreds of slaves overboard and collected on the insurance. Through the tenacity of the community and good people, the slave owners were taken to court, and Equiano then drew Granville Sharp's attention to this, and then that raised the profile of the case. But the people who did it got away with it, basically. And there's a lot to Black British history that we are still yet to learn, because you would think, because it's a part of British history, that, okay, we should be educated, especially given our experiences and our lack of resources, we should be educated about our history here. But no, we're coming to a country where we don't even realize what has gone on in the spot where we're standing and what has happened to Black people here. There's some stories, there's some little articles called runaway apprentices, as they were then. And the descriptions they give is of Black people. And this is in the 1700s. So to think there were Black people working in factories and mills in the 1700s here in Leeds and Yorkshire, it just kind of, blows the mind. So we're not being told this history, so we have to dig it up ourselves with the little resources we have. And we have to try and promote it like the Americans promote their Black heroes to compensate for their experiences. We have to do the same in Britain here in order to hand on the legacy to our young people so that they know that the world that they are growing up in, their ancestors have contributed enormously to. And the other person I wanted to highlight was Frederick Douglass, who is like 100 years later, nearly. And he was born a slave in America. And the significance of Frederick Douglass is that he taught himself to read and write, and then became the first statesman in American politics. And he became an ambassador to Haiti. But when he discovered what the politics was going on there, he soon left. As Arthur pointed out the other day, Haiti is one of the poorest nations and the most neglected nations in the world. That's directly because they were the first nation to revolt against slavery successfully. We have Geraldine Connor here, who directed a production at the West Yorkshire Playhouse in 2004 to mark the bicentenary of the revolution of the enslaved peoples in Haiti. Now, to me, it seems like when you hear the news of people risking their lives to get into Europe from Africa for opportunities that they could have had, another important thing Equiano did, he made a call to northern manufacturers. He said, if you develop relationships with Africa and encourage African people to work toward producing their own minerals that could then be manufactured here in the north, it would benefit both nations and it would lift Africa up. But I think we know what happened instead of that. And it does make you think how the North, with its manufacturing base, what the real stories are. Because not only were they seriously involved in slavery, but also in the abuses and exploitation of African resources, whereby Africans themselves did not profit, but were. Slavery itself undermined the communities in Africa and led to the destruction that we see now. Colonialism just basically robbed all the minerals that was there, and the legacy of that is still going. And we do have to think in terms of fair trade and justice and democracy. We have to learn lessons from there if we are to put the situation in Africa right. And as people are clamoring, risking their lives to come to Europe for opportunities to fulfill dreams, it makes me think about why we're here, why my parents' generation came here. why we're here now. And it seems to me that we're in a better position than millions of other people to do some good in parts of the world that needs good being done. And I think for young people, I think they have some brilliant opportunities to educate themselves and put themselves into positions whereby they can help people who have been so devastated from history. Okay. I just thought I'd create a context there. On our program this afternoon, we have some singing, we have poetry, and hopefully we may have some speakers to talk about fair trade and making poverty history. But first of all, I'm going to hand you over to our keynote speaker, Ras Nancy is a writer and a poet from the Caribbean. He recently had some successful performances at the Edinburgh Festival and very recently has performed at the Ilkley Literature Festival too. So without any further ado, I should introduce Ras Anansi. We're very honored to have him. And he will tell you
slavery. Do you know where that word comes from? No? Okay. It is rather ironic, the story of that word. In it lies the history of a human institution. Our English word, the one that we say with bitterness, slave, comes from the old French word, esclave. Esclave comes from the medieval Latin word, sclavus. Do you see how far back I'm going? Come good. Sclavus was also the Latin word for the people that today we call the Slavs, who lived in Eastern Europe, people who speak languages with common Slavic roots, Russians, Bulgarians, Poles, Czechs, Yugoslavs. History says these Sclavos were once a barbarian tribe, forced away from their homes by the nomadic Avars, the ones who eventually came out of the Euro-Asian steppes to destroy the Roman Empire. These Avars needed food, so they turned the Slavs into slaves to till the soil for them. But the practice of slavery goes back much further than a word that came to mean any person sold into servitude owned by another. In its early pure form, you see, slavery was an equal opportunity institution. It did not consider the color of the slave's skin as something of significance. There were slaves of all colors, from all nations. The only principle was, might is right. The history of slavery is the history of humankind. It existed in all of the ancient societies: Egypt, China, India, Peru, Mexico. Two civilizations which we often cite as the twin pillars of our Western civilization, Greece and Rome, could not have evolved as they did without slavery. Nor did these ancient societies believe they were being either inhumane or cruel by using slaves. After all, might was right. Rulers naturally took precautions against becoming slaves themselves. There's a limit on whose might make who right. Indeed, slavery sometimes enjoyed divine support. The Old Testament speaks of slavery as an accepted practice. Both in the Middle Ages and in our own modern era, starting with, let's say, around 1500, the churches of Europe and later the Americas approved of slavery. The Anglican Church was a strong advocate of slavery in the English colonies, and it is one of the few topics on which Roman Catholics and Protestants agreed. With the Catholic Church advocating enslaving blacks and Indians in the West Indies and South America. Islam was not outside the fold, and when it became a dominant religion in the world, it too blessed the enslavement of people from many religions and nations. The Christians had a simple rationalization. The Christian religion was, of course, morally superior to pagan religion. Therefore, it was actually in the best interest of the pagan slave to be owned by a Christian. The inherent brutalization of slavery was really a kindness if one compared being owned by a Christian to the spiritual wasteland of paganism. I sometimes wonder if our forebears realized how blessed they were. In the earliest stages of its manifestation, slavery was the result of conquest and custom. If you survived the battle but lost the war, you could become a slave, a part of the legitimate spoils of the victor. If you were unable to pay a debt, you could sell a family member or yourself to pay the debt. A child born of a slave traditionally became a slave. While all slaves were without their freedom, the conditions under which they lived and worked varied from place to place and time to time. The work performed by slaves also varied, from domestic servants to soldiering, to teachers, administrators, and ruling of states and empires, as the Mamluks did for over 250 years in Egypt. And this is where we come in. As the most brutalized, those brought to labor on the sugar plantations. To understand the modern incarnation of slavery, that which is our history, is to understand the most simple rules of economics, that of supply and demand. When Christopher Columbus stumbled onto the West Indies, he opened the door for European colonization. Having finally given up on the idea of finding vast deposits of gold and gardens of spices, he realized this was a place where much could be grown, if only there were enough labor to grow it. The markets of Europe were waiting, colonies themselves to become markets for the goods of Europe. And yet, there was that problem of labor. As European nations scurried to secure footholds in the New World, which was not so new to the people who lived there and had been living there for over thousands of years, they found that they needed first and foremost cheap and steady labor upon which to build an economy. And their eyes turned from this new world to one which they were a little more familiar, Africa. I can almost see them now, stroking their chins and saying, yes, you got some labor. So now, in shaking out this tattered quilt we call history, we must look at the patch called Africa. Because this was the time when slavery became a matter of color. Even before the 15th century New World's demand for plantation slaves as an export product, there was a slave trade in Africa. The Arabs and Turks had been taking slaves from Africa for centuries. One legacy of this, the spark of today's turmoil in Sudan, when Muslim Arabs from the north raided the south for black slaves. As all other continents, slavery was an accepted part of the African civilizations, where slaves were used as domestic servants and laborers. Most slaves were acquired through wars and raids, and some through selling themselves to settle debts. Color as a determinant did not enter the slave master equation, but enter the Portuguese, whose king took the title of Lord of Guinea around 1480, after setting up trading forts in the Guinea coast of West Africa with the permission of the local African kings and chiefs. Black slaves began appearing in the markets of Lisbon. Slaves purchased there were shipped all over Europe, and the modern slave trade was underway. The demand was there. Now only the supply had to be assured. And it was assured by Africans wielding the whip hand over both goods and the middlemen, the white slave traders, in exchange for rum, gin, brandy, firearms, trinkets, and trash. The Africans agreed to sell their own people. It was an upward spiral. Sell some people, get some guns, use the guns to make war, get more people to sell, and get even more guns so you can get even more people. And you see, it was not the 20th, the 19th, or even the 18th century that invented the arms race. And friends, do not lose track of that word, rum. On the West Coast trade, the early demand for slaves was met through wars between kingdoms, the most traditional way of procuring slaves. Then raiding for the sole purpose of acquiring slaves became necessary as demand increased. Forays were made further and further inland, and the inland tribes began to involve themselves in the trade. Captives, sometimes whole villages, were marched to the coast in cottles, tied at the neck, held apart by tree limbs. Some slaves were criminals, transshipped in much the same way England would send its convicts to Australia. Adulterers might also be sold into slavery, as were debtors. Occasionally, Europeans themselves tried to fill the demand for slaves by doing their own kidnapping along the coast. However, in some areas, Europeans were forbidden to do their own catching. A white man caught doing so could be captured and enslaved himself. High irony. Capturing people to be sold into slavery was for the most part an African monopoly, one which made life in West Africa very insecure for a population that was severely decimated. The preferred currency was rum. Africans often refused to deal with traders from the Americas or West Indies who could not offer barrels of rum for their slaves. Do not lose track of that word, rum. The pioneering Portuguese controlled the slave trade for the first 100 years. Their contribution to the trade included not only the first slave fort in West Africa, but words palavra, coming from the Portuguese palavra, which is speech, and pequenini, coming from pequenino, for very little. When Portugal united with Spain in 1580, other Europeans challenged their domination of the trade. And by the end of the 17th century, Holland, England, France, and Denmark had become slaving nations, both supplying and colonizing in the New World. As traders, they were later joined by the Americans. They were tough competitors for the human cargo which would build that New World. On the eastern coast of Africa and the Sudan, it was the Arabs who dominated the slave trade, as they had since the 8th century. Unlike the Europeans, they did their own hunting and herding, for they were as concerned with taking of Africa's ivory as its people. While the Africans placed no value on ivory beyond its usefulness in their daily lives, it was in great demand in the Arab and the European worlds. The Arab raiders would attack a village, then force the captives, each loaded with an ivory tusk, to the coast. They controlled the trade through their colony of Zanzibar. Another difference with the European slavers who, except for Portuguese Angola, were unable to make permanent settlements in the West Coast. The independent African chiefs and kings refused to allow it. Independent-minded African chiefs and kings? Does that surprise you? It is something we must face. In many ways, the African slave trade was truly African. During most of the period, the slaves trade was dominated by several African kingdoms. They would grant land on the coast to the European companies, enough for a fort or a trading center, for which the Europeans would charge an annual rent and to which they were often confined. Africans went into the interior and brought slaves in. With fierce competition between the European traders, Africans often found it advantageous to take sides. Europeans who lacked the chief support would find themselves without a fort, and sometimes a chief, having chased the Europeans out, would replace the fort's governor with one of his own people. Considering the nature of the trade, it is perhaps no surprise that neither side trusted the other, a further legacy of our times. Rum. Remember I told you, do not lose track of that word rum. It was the currency the Africans preferred, and it led to a profitable trading triangle that fed upon itself. An African who became immersed in that triangle was doomed either to die from starvation or disease in the stinking hold of a ship, or to become the chattel of another man in a faraway and unfamiliar land, without as much and no more than any beast. Language, family, ancestry, identity would all be taken away. An African who survived the journey was to live out whatever days remained brutalized by the very human institution slavery, traded for a barrel of rum made through the labor of another African slave. Okay, let me tell you about that journey of loss, that middle passage. You are a young man, say 14, 15 perhaps. Let's say your name is Majuba. You live in a small village inland of the Gold Coast. One night you awake to a great clamoring, a shouting. Fierce men rush into your village and burst into your hut. Even as you reach for your spear to protect your mother and sisters, you hear a great roar close to your head, and your father drops to the dirt floor, twitches, and lies still. These men have guns. What can we do against guns? Your mother, your sisters are herded into the street, shivering and fearful. You have heard stories about the slave catchers, and you feel and you watch as your mother's legs fold under her. A man grabs her by her hair and pulls her upright. You want to rush to her aid. Another man pokes your sister in the most private parts and laughs. You feel shame for your sister, but as you try to move towards her, a blow lands on your head and you are stunned. Stay put, your mother says. When daylight comes, you are in a long line of villagers being marched towards the sea. Around your neck is a rope, like a bullock. Ahead of you, somewhere in the line, is your mother and your sisters. The blow to your head cut your scalp, and the blood has dried, and flies feast on it. But you dare not raise your hand to brush them away. Sometimes the lines hold. The line hold, and you are given a little water. The man ahead of you stumbles, and an Ashanti whips him like a dog. When he stumbles again and falls, he is killed. Cut out of the line, his body left for the beast. You wonder if he's not better off than you. By the time you pass your sister, your younger sister's body, you are too numb to mourn her. After many days, you arrive at a town, something you have never seen before. There's a big fort, and you are marched into its courtyard where you collapse. This is when you see your first white man. An Ashanti chief talks to the white man, and you are forced to stand as you are prodded. Your mouth is forced open. Your penis is handled. You see your mother turn her head away when the white man squeezes her breast and slaps her bottom. The white man nods his head sometimes, shakes it other times. When he shakes it, the person is untied and shoved out of the group. There's a fire in the courtyard. Those at whom the white man nodded are herded towards it. When you see and smell what is happening, you want to run. But of course, by now, there's no place to run. Your turn comes and you smell your own flesh burning as it's seared by a hot iron. Each of you has been branded with a symbol D.Y. Though it makes no difference to you, you are now the property of the Company of Royal Adventurers of England, trading in Africa, which was chartered under the Duke of York, the brother of the British King, Charles II. With your flesh blistering and the wound on your head festering, you are thrust into a dark, dank, stone-holding cell beneath the fort, fed and watered little. You do not know when one day ends and another begins. You sleep on a stone cold floor with no covering. When you awake, sometimes the man next to you is alive, and sometimes he's dead. After a time, you do not know how long, you are ordered above ground. This time chains are placed on you and you are shuffled to the shore. There you are pitched into a large canoe, paddled by black men, as black as you, who do not look at you. Growing larger against the sea is a ship. You have heard stories of these ships. Stories told to frighten children into being good. You think now you will be eaten by the white men on the ship, but you are not. Indeed, you are forced down a ladder deeper and deeper into the bowels of the ship, more and more of you. You are forced to crawl because above you is a shelf where other men are stored. You are told to lie down, and when you protest there is no room, you are struck. The man who strikes you is as black as you, and when he turns away, you can see in the dim light that he also is branded. You lay down, but as more and more people are forced into the ship, you must move from your back to your side. You do not know the man whose chest presses against your back, nor the man against whose back you press yours. And then the light is shut out and the ship begins to move. There's a great wailing from the hole and you find yourself joining in. Goodbye, mother, sister, father, sun's warm, fire on the breeze. Goodbye, Africa. There's no way to tell time on the ship. Sometimes the black men with the brands like you whip you and force you on deck, where you are allowed to sit in the clean air. One day, the man 3 paces down from you vomits. A white man comes to look at him, pulls up his eyelids and thumps his chest. Then the man is hoisted over the side. You would like to ask someone what is happening, but no one around you speaks your language, and your days are spent mute. When you are sent below into the hole again, you try to grab one more lungful of fresh air, because below it is now hard to crawl over the layers of ship and vomit that coats the deck. When the white man comes into the hole, they cover their noses and mouths with pieces of cloth. You no longer have anything covering you, but modesty is a luxury you left on shore. Perhaps it is only 3 weeks, perhaps it is 3 months. When the ship finally comes to anchor, you are simply glad that you are no longer beaten against the waves. Even if now they will eat you, at least you will be on land again when they do so. You are not eaten. Instead, you are forced off the ship and you scramble as best you are able because you have walked little since you were put on the ship. Down a dusty street into a large yard. Here you are fed. The food is strange, but you are hungry and you eat it. This place is as warm as home, and the warmth makes you think distant thoughts to the day before the night their shanty came and took your world away with the roar of their guns. You are allowed to rest. Once some men come into the yard and throw buckets of water on you and laughs when you shiver. Somehow the wound on your head has healed over, though now you have a leathery scar where no hair grows. Someone says there are women and children here. You wonder about your mother and sisters, but only for a little while. When a man reaches his hand around you to fletch part of your rations, you strike him. For a moment, you are shocked by what you have done, striking an older man. Then the moment passes. When he turns away to stanch the blood you have brought to his nose, you take his bread. Again, you are in a line. Ahead of you, people are pushed onto a high platform. When your time comes, you look down into a sea of white faces. The scene reminds you of market days at home, only now you are a bullock being sold. Several men come onto the platform, examine you, force you to bend over as they feel your legs. You do not feel like a person anymore. There is some shouting back and forth, and you are led off the platform to stand by a large white man with a very red face under the white brim of his hat. There are 4 others there. You do not know them, but they look as numb and as lost as you feel. After a while, a woman with a small child is brought over from the platform. They are put into the bed of the wagon, and you and the other men are roped together behind it. The white man takes the rein of the royal horse, pulling the wagon, and you must walk behind it or be dragged. After many miles, the wagon stops. A black man with a scarred back comes out from a small shack. He has a whip in his hand, and he's wearing clothing somewhat like a white man's. He grins at you. "Welcome to Barbados, my sorry brother," he says. You do not understand him. He's not from your part of Africa. But that makes no difference. You have lost Africa, and Africa has lost you. To the Ashanti, you were worked a barrel of rum, and now you will be made to grow the cane that will be made into the molasses, which will become the rum that will take more people out of Africa. How did this rum trade triangle come about? That is an interesting story, which we must go back and pick up. Spain began to colonize the West Indies quite soon after their discovery by Columbus. It was an up and down effort. But by the start of the 16th century, the Spanish West Indian colonies were firmly established and badly in need of labor to grow sugarcane, which was in high demand in Europe and as the basis for the rum which was wanted in Africa as payment for the slave trade. The colonists at first thought of making use of the indigenous Indian population, but they proved unable to handle the work, as well as the diseases against which they had no immunity. Here we have stepping into the picture a man of God who meant well. Bartholomew de las Casas, a Jesuit known as the Apostles of the Indians, was an influential priest devastated by the brutality which was destroying the Amerindian population. In less than 50 years, the native population had declined from 10 million to less than 1 million. In his effort to save those that remained, de las Casas suggested the idea of importing African slaves. They were, he reasoned, better adapted to the kind of grueling work needed to raise and process sugarcane. Accordingly, he proposed to King Charles I that 4,000 African slaves be brought to the West Indies to save the native population. The king agreed, and though de las Casas almost immediately regretted his suggestion, it was too late. In 1517, the king arranged to have 4,000 African slaves shipped to the West Indies by merchants in Genoa. The Spanish colonists were not to be allowed Africa to buy their own black slaves. A formal agreement with the Genoa merchants called an asiento, meaning an agreement between Spain and another country or trading company to supply slaves to the Spanish colonies, was signed. Securing of the Spanish asiento became a much sought after prize for slaving powers. It is doubtful the slaves themselves cared very much who brought them. Life in the West Indies for a slave was a matter of luck, the luck being where they were landed. For instance, in the 16th and 17th centuries, Spanish Cuba and Trinidad, until 1802, when it passed to Britain, owners were bidden to prepare their slaves for baptism within a year of importation, sending them to Mass on Sundays and festivals. Slaves could choose their own wives from any place in the district, and one owner had to sell up to the other so the couple could be together. Families could not be separated by selling to pay a master's debts. Legally, slaves couldn't own property, but they did by custom, even by owning houses, land, and other slaves. The most noteworthy part of the Spanish system was the relative ease with which a slave could become free. He could purchase himself at fair market value or pay part of himself and then make payments on himself, usually by hiring himself out, as long as he splits his earnings with his owner, in addition to making his own monthly payments on his freedom. Children weren't automatically slaves, but could be made free by being paid for before or immediately after birth. There was even a protector of slaves, an official who could intercede with owners over purchase price, and in case of ill treatment, get the slaves sold to another, and one would hope, kinder master. Perhaps most telling of all, in 1817, Cuba had 199,000 slaves out of a population of 383,000. Perhaps because of their historical experience with the Moors, the Spanish were less conscious of racial divisions in their society, and people of color or mixed races could enter society on the precept that money whitens the skin. Then, in the 18th and 19th century, life for slaves in the Spanish West Indies became harsher. Sugar became king. In the British West Indies, freedom was much harder to come by. British policy was the fewer freed blacks, the better. And it was assumed that any person who was black was a slave. Blacks unable to show proof of their free status were sold, and being born free was a guarantee of freedom only if you stayed put. As for religion and those suffering pagans I mentioned earlier, one British statesman, George Canning, said that the Church of England was no more calculated for the Negro than for the brute animal who shares his toil. The task of saving black souls went to the Methodists and the Moravians, outcast themselves in the British West Indies. In 1822, a commissioner investigating justice in the British colonies noted, "No man or set of men have legal power to call the slave master to account for working his slave as long as he likes, for whipping him as much as he pleases, for chaining, for starving him." Little wonder, slaves in the British colonies rebelled much more than those in the Spanish colonies. The main aim of the British planter was making money, and any way they could do that was the way to do it. The main cash crop in Barbados, Jamaica, and the other British West Indies colonies was sugar. In the French colonies, the Code Nord governed the treatment of slaves, declaring that slaves were incapable of possessing anything except to use to their master. It did say an owner couldn't sell a slave between the age of 14 and 60 away from the plantation to settle a debt, and that a family could not be sold separately. While punishment was at the master's discretion, masters weren't supposed to torture, maim, or kill their slaves. Each French slave were to be educated in the Catholic faith, baptized, and given a full day off on Sundays and festivals, as well as provided with food and clothing. In theory, an ill-treated slave could appeal to a magistrate. Most of the Code Nord was ignored by the French planters. They were in the business of making money and would not be thwarted in their effort by any law. A sick or old slave received worse treatment than better, and sometimes accused of a crime to relieve the owner of responsibility. This practice was so widespread, jails hired doctors to make sure prisoners were healthy, not being simply foisted onto the public expense until they died. Unlike the British, the French owners often lived permanently in the islands, and they were determined to maintain the same racial separation as existed in France. They did not approve of open sexual relationship between the races. On St. Lucia, slaves could not wear the same kind of clothing as whites, nor could they be addressed as Mr. or Madame in any legal document, being known only as that man or that woman. The French were more willing than the British to grant slaves freedom and imported more women slaves to enable more slaves to find partners with or without marriage, as long as they got the sugar planted, harvested, and processed. And where do the Americans come in? The southern states like the West Indies were plantation societies, growing tobacco, rice, indigo, and later cotton. They needed cheap, plentiful labor, and like the West Indies, they built their economies on the backs of black slaves. But it is further north we must look to the industrial and shipping centers of New England, where there were no plantations and no slave markets, and where the spirit of abolitionism was already beginning to burn. It was here that the rum was paid, which paid the Africans was made. It was from here that the ships left for Africa, their casks safely stored below decks, and it was in Africa that those New England ships from Boston, Newport, and Salem purchased their human cargo, replacing rum casks with human beings, and sailed for the West Indies. And it was in the West Indies that those terrified human beings were sold and sent to the plantation to go to sugar cane and make it into molasses to be loaded onto those American ships, now cleaned as much as possible of the excrement and shit and vomit and decay of the voyage from Africa, and carried back to New England to be made into rum so the infernal journey could begin again. The sugar, the rum, the slaves. The sugar, the rum, the slaves. The sugar, the rum, the slaves. The macabre triangle that fed on itself because it made money for people in 3 continents. Look at what it did. Africa was decimated, and by the 19th century it was too weak to protect itself against colonization by those European nations that had been its partners as they sold off their own population. The West Indies, South and Central and North America became societies whose history said that the right of one people to enslave another is based on the color of skin. The principle was confirmed that one group of people may pillage another for profit. My brothers and sisters, slavery was not invented in 1480, when the Portuguese built that first fort. It existed long before that, part of our failing history as human beings. It was not an oppression visited on blacks by whites, but one visited on people by people solely for the purpose of profit, when a tot of rum was worth a human being. Modern slavery, as we call it, was not racist in its instigation, although it became so in its institution. The story I have told you this evening is not just our history, it is our present. Because we still sell each other every day for our own greed, our own gift, profit. In the bad days of which I've spoken, the owners often put a slave in charge of other slaves. And those slaves were the most brutal to their own. Human beings who feel oppressed need a sense of power and importance to dominate others as they themselves are dominated. When we can stop that, when we no longer lessen another person's worth for our own gain and take more than our share of the earth's wealth, when we can look at how we are alike and not so different and embrace our common humanity, then the slave trade will finally be over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to say a big thank you to Russ Manciai. If we could give him another round of applause. Russ was very eloquent and very well articulated and very clear and concise in highlighting the points of the slave trade and bringing it home and the significance of how it relates today and the fact that slavery does still continue today in many different ways as well. Okay, just to say that copies of Russ Nance's speech, Arthur is holding a booklet there, which are on sale at the back, and you are very welcome to purchase a copy. If you do, the funds also contribute to the Black History Events Fund as well, as we're building up to 2007. There's also a collection box, as it is a free event. If you'd like to make a donation to our events for future events, it would be greatly appreciated. Okay, thank you very much. Now, before we hear Kwame give a talk and present his video, we're going to have some singing. First, we're very blessed to have some singers who will introduce themselves. If they'll make their way up here, please. Put your hands together for Raising Notes. Raising Notes. Rising Notes.
Rising Notes project, and we're going to sing for you Amazing Grace. We were asked to sing Amazing Grace, and I think after what we've just heard, it's quite fitting. Please, if you know the song and you want to join in with us, please join in.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Rising Notes, we're a bit depleted today, but we meet on a Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30 down here, and we are intergenerational because we have young and we have old, and all of us work together to learn and to learn off each other and to sing, we mime, we dance, we do everything that we can creatively for God, and it's drama as well that we do too. So next time you hear about Rising Notes, please give us a whoop whoop because we need that. But also, if you want to come down and join in and visit us, please do, because we're here, actually here at the West Indian Centre. That's where we meet on a Wednesday. So you're more than welcome to come along. The song that we're going to sing next is There Will Be Mountains That I Will Have to Climb. So please enjoy with us.
There will be mountains that I will have to brought me this far to leave me. And I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. And I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
Thank you very much there to the Alpha Group Rising Notes. If we could just give them another warm round of applause. Very inspiring and uplifting. Faith is very important. It's always been important to us during the Middle Passage and what took place after as well, and in our lives today. The Amazing Grace song, which they sang first, was written by a man called John Newton, who Arthur is always talking about because he was a slave trader himself. He traded in slaves. He used to take the ship to Africa, take the slaves over to the Caribbean, and so he was a witness to the immense brutality that took place among slaves. He was a slave for a number of years, and then I believe he was speaking with another Christian captain, because there were many Christian captains who were involved in the slave trade. And he eventually saw the wickedness that it took out of him, really, and he turned his life around and wrote Amazing Grace, and the lyrics are quite appropriate, and they do hit a chord. Okay, thank you very much for being with us. We're going to have a 10-minute break now, and afterwards we're going to hear Kwame speak about the making of his video. Are there any speakers from Fair Trade or Poverty History? If they could identify themselves? Not as yet? Okay then. So when you come back, we'll have some more entertainment for you. Thank you very much. 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you would like to resume in your seats, please, thank you. I just want to make an announcement here. The Prospect Academy is having a parents' consultation meeting regarding education. That's tomorrow, Monday the 24th of October. Here at the West Indian Centre, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. there is a meeting for parents. Do you want to support excellence in education? If it doesn't apply to you, perhaps you know people who it does apply to. So if you could pass the word on, that's tomorrow evening, 6:30 to 8:30 here at the West Indian Centre. Okay, and also, of course, today is the launch of the Leeds West Indian Centre's Black History Committee's celebration of Black History. So today's the first day. On Tuesday at 6 o'clock, we have Black Question Time, and we'll be looking at the generation gap between young people and the elders in the community. I myself will be chairing the event, and we'll have representation on the panel. So bring your questions, bring your ears, bring your enthusiasm. It'll be an orderly event. There'll be nobody speaking out of turn, because I'm in the chair. And then next Sunday, we're having Grandpa's Cook-Up, which will start at 2 o'clock. There'll be entertainment, DJs, and food as well. Now, before I introduce Kwame, I just wanted to pick up a couple of things in what Nancy was talking about in terms of sugar. And we talk about the economy of the region. Sugar made this region quite rich in terms of the individuals that were involved. When he spoke of the Middle Passage and how the slaves were stopped in the ships in order to be taken to the sugar plantations, sometimes they were crowded in so much they had to lie on their side, as Ross and Nancy said. Now, a notorious part of that history was a man called Henry Lascelles, who had a ship moored off the coast of Africa. And his idea was, instead of keeping the slaves on land, on African soil, where they could rebel and run away, was to store them on a ship until a passing slave ship came by. He affectionately called it his slave factory. Henry Lascelles then became the first Lord Harewood, and with the proceeds of what he made from slavery, built Harewood House. Now, Harewood House is celebrating the abolition of slavery in 2007, and they are very open, and they are acknowledging the history of their family. They're not hiding it. It's the history of many aristocratic families in England. But what is unique is that the Harewood Trust have actually opened their vaults of all the historical information regarding slavery. They've opened that up to the public, and I think they should be commended for that, because what it does, it actually helps to tell the story of the trauma that we have experienced. So instead of just thinking we've experienced a trauma but we don't know what happened, the fact that they've opened their vaults allow us to understand how the economy of Britain was raised and how we would, as Africans, were displaced. And so I think that's very much to be commended. Okay, now I just want to before I introduce Kwame, I just want to mention a couple of things. I mentioned Alauda Equiano coming to Leeds in 1789. Frederick Douglass, the American abolitionist, he came to Leeds in 1846 and 1859. He spoke at Leeds Town Hall. We have the speech for that. A couple of other interesting people. With Frederick Douglass, there was an African-American woman called Sarah Reuben Parker. And she wasn't born into slavery, although it says on there that she was. She wasn't. She was born in New York. Her parents were abolitionists fighting for the cause as well. And she came to England to speak to the ladies of Yorkshire and all around England against slavery. And she spoke about the licentious behavior of the slave owners in the Caribbean and in America. And it's just amazing to think of this very forthright, very outspoken African-American woman in the 1850s going around England. Her desire was to train as a nurse. I dare say she was inspired by Mary Seacole. And she studied at the Bedford College of Nursing in Bedfordshire. And then she went to Italy, where she further studied nursing and practiced for some 20 years in that profession. And it's phenomenal when you think about it. You know, when we think about the things holding us back today, what must have been standing in her way that she just went straight through. And so it's an inspiring story of courage and determination. And we also had entertainers. Ira Aldridge, who was the foremost Shakespearean actor of his time, black or white. He was awarded medals and a knighthood by European royalty. He took Shakespeare to small corners of Africa where they'd never even heard of Shakespeare and didn't speak English, but they appreciated the emotions of the characters that he portrayed. He was so strong a performer, you could feel him, you know what I'm saying? And he married a local woman from Scarborough and had 3 or 4 children. One of them went on to be an opera singer and an elocutionist. She taught the aristocracy their pronunciation. And she also went on to coach Paul Robeson when he came to London to play Othello as well. So there's a generational link there. And I've just recently found out on the good old internet about a guy called Pablo Fanque. Now, he was Britain's first black circus proprietor, and he was an equestrian. His speciality was riding horses and doing all the acrobatic skills on horses. Ira Aldridge performed in Leeds twice, and we know that Pablo Franque came to Leeds 2 or 3 times, and in fact he is buried here. And his circus was at its height in the 1850s and 60s, and he's mentioned very briefly in a John Lennon song, in a Beatles song that John Lennon wrote. I think it's Something for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, I think is the name of the song, and Pablo Franque's circus is mentioned. He was quite a celebrity at the time, and it's just interesting to know that all these people passed through Leeds and nobody told me, but we've got to big them up. We have to big them up. Okay, without further ado, I'll now introduce you to Kwame, who will inform you about what he does and tell you about the video presentation that he's about to make. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon all. Yes, I'm going to introduce a video I did about 2 years ago. It's looking at our history. I think it's important to look at the media. We know the media is a powerful tool, but the problem is the media sets up our role models. And by implication, if the role models the media is setting up don't look like us, then the implication also is that we as African people, as African Caribbean people, do not have role models, achievers who have done the kind of things that every week we see certain historical programs that will show you, I don't know, what Churchill might have done or other historical figures, but we don't see the balance of African Caribbean figures who've done similar type of achievements. So it is important that we realize through forums like this, through Black History Month, that there are such figures coming from African Caribbean backgrounds, and that's why I did this program, because it came on at a time when we had something called the 100 Great Brits. And I was really disappointed that out of all 100 Great Brits, not one of them was African Caribbean or even mixed race or any kind of African Caribbean descent. So that's why I made this program. As I say, it was done about 2 years ago, so it was my first attempt at filmmaking. So you have to take that into account also. So yeah, just before I show it, the other thing is also, as well as the actual historical figures, I also tried to incorporate some initiatives that are going on in our community, and not just here in Leeds, but there's a sample from Huddersfield, there's also a sample from Bradford, where initiatives are going on to educate the community as to our history. Because again, if the media is not doing it, then it's our responsibility to do it. You know, and if we don't, we can't just sit and say, well, they're not doing it, so what do we do? You know, we have to take that responsibility, each and every one of us, even to educating our children, those around us, family, friends, whatever. Okay, so whenever you're ready, yeah, thanks. Microphone, anybody want a microphone?
I truly think that that's brilliant, because I know the uphill struggle that it takes to make a work of art like that, a documentary, because you just got so many people going against you the whole time. Even in the theatre field, you know, where your job is to tell stories about your people. And the minute you start, people say, no, that's not right, that didn't happen. Black people aren't able to black. It's such an uphill struggle. So, you know, well, now, if anybody would like to ask Kwame any questions, I'm very willing to hand the mic back to him if one person raises their hand. You have a question? Can I give you the microphone? Is that all right? Sorry. And who was the film aimed?
Well, as I say, it was universal. you know, for youths, adolescents, elderly, or... Sorry?
Seems to me the best film was that was the aim of the film. Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
The aim of the film, as I understand, was to get across the message that there was a need for teaching the background and history in the school. Am I right?
Yeah.
But is there a need for that? Don't all recognize this? And that the film should be directed at those who are responsible for the education system. Tell them, one or two things. Direct the film to the education authorities. And I don't think that's necessary either. They know that. And a film of this sort ought to be filling the gap which is left by the education system. It ought to be a film of Black or Western history. You see? In other words, that minutes or so that the film should be full of Western history or Canadian history or African history for the benefit of this audience. The benefit of my experience in producing. First of all, to pick your audience, to do something to bring it to the film. But there's no need to tell us that yes, you should support the education system. They don't need to tell the authorities they know. In the meantime, what we're doing is filling the gap in the education system until the authorities come to realize that we are doing the job that they should do.
So that's a word of encouragement. We have to keep going, basically saying, until it's recognized that they should be doing this job in the first place. But, you know, Kwam's video inspired them. Is there anything you wanted to?
Yeah, it's just to say that, yes, you're right, it's the authorities' responsibility, but as I've said previous also, it's also our responsibility as well. We can't just leave everything for them, because that's the position we're in now. You know, even now if we look on TV, we're still not seeing programs with our faces reflected. So that's a problem. It has to be attacked on many different levels.
Does anybody else have a question? Would they like to raise their hand, please? Okay. Yes, we have a question at the back.
What are the mandate countries that it says, even in time that we have to put all this together?
Well, you think about that.
Yeah, it's a good question because, like was just said, that when you try to put something like that, you're finding obstacles all along the way. Even the team that I had to film it and everything, even they had their own agenda. So after the film was finished, I even had to re-edit the film to put our agenda, if you like. So those are parts of the obstacles that you'll find in trying to make a program. You know. So yes, so to answer your question, there was many obstacles. Yeah.
Any other questions? Something that I think is quite relevant. I'll come to you, Leo. I'll just make this point. I find it very difficult to believe that because our history has been taken away from us, we want to educate ourselves about our history, but the funders don't see that. They will fund African dance to go into Hockley or into other places, but they don't think that black children need to see and understand and study black dance and other aspects of black history as well. So if I develop a history project, I find it's going everywhere else apart from where it actually needs to go. And that's something we've got to understand. And I'll just pass the microphone to you.
I just wanted to ask if the video was generally available for other projects.
Yes, it is available. Currently it's going through some universities, schools, whatever. Yeah, so if people want to contact me, I can give them a contact number or whatever. Yeah, it is available.
Okay, yes, I can hear you quite clearly, Jeremy.
What's your strategy for the future in terms of doing this work, doing more of this work, and letting it be seen by more people? Do you have a strategy?
Well, yeah, well, the strategy is to move on from that one, because like I said, that one was done 2 years ago. So, and even that one, to do that one took about 6-8 months. So to do one even bigger and better, we're talking about a year and a half to, even the research, because obviously everything starts from research, and each fact has to be 100% factual. So there were some people that had to drop out of it because the facts weren't 100%, you'd find conflicting facts. So certain things had to drop out because I didn't want to put anything in that somebody would come in and say, well, I know different, you see, so that kind of thing. So yes, I'm in the process of a follow-up to that, but it will be bigger and, yeah.
One more question. If you could realize your dream, what would it be to do with this work? What would your dream be?
Well, it is really about doing more programs like this, but even a series, because this is what we need on TV, regular series. Because even now, if we look on TV, we're seeing series about historical figures, and a lot of times it's the same figures we're seeing again and again. They put a series, then like Hitler. There's been so many programs on about Hitler. Is Hitler gay? And it's like they're lost for ideas. So we have enough information on our heroes, if you like, our role models, that we could even do series. Because each of the people I featured on here, I could do a program of each one themselves. That's how much information there is out there.
You were talking about factual information, though. I heard that Dr. Charles Drew, who invented the blood separating plasma from blood to store it, I heard that when he was in the car accident, he was taken to the nearest hospital, which was a white hospital. They refused to give him blood, and that's why he died.
Just to follow up on that, because I didn't know of that, but the problem was I was on the internet and I found an alternate that said that's not the case. So because there was some question, that's why I didn't put that fact in.
There is a lot of controversy to do with Black history because of a lot of it's hearsay and unwritten. But we have to follow in our hearts what we think is true.
I just want to ask, I know you're taking the project into schools and universities. Have you thought of expanding it into prisons? Because that's where we come from. And there's a lot of ignorance in prisons about Black history and multicultural things.
In a word, no, I haven't thought of that, but it's a brilliant idea, and I'd be willing to do it. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
I know some local artists who are going into prison. Michelle Scully Clark, for one, she's doing work with young men in prisons, and she's putting wrongs to rights.
Thank you, my brother. Something that just come into my mind, and I guess let me ask you whether education is something very powerful. And you're trying to create this sort of education to educate people around. Maybe, I don't know whether you're aiming for the European or maybe for the UK or whatever. But do you really think that sometimes it's necessary to go back into your root? And this sort of education is also going in that direction instead one. I mean to say, is it possible for you to kind of later on think of this sort of education that they're trying to bring out send it back to Africa so that those people down there also, some of them might not be getting the right information.
I'll bring the mic around, but somebody need to tell somebody that the rights are gone.
Yes, I am currently, well, I do go backwards and forwards to Kenya, that's one place. So the video is also in circulation in Kenya as well. So, yeah, I'm doing that kind of thing as well. Yeah, thanks.
People must understand how the systems work. As the sister said there, as those of us who understand history, as Sister Angela Davis said, the prisoners are not those who the criminals are not those who populate the prisons, but those who administrate the system, make them into criminals. So, you should be ashamed of who you are. I mean, the greatest man anyone alive I've ever seen is Nelson Mandela, and he spent 27 years in prison. The other thing that people need to understand that the education system is the most racist institution. It is an institutionalized system, and you're dealing with an enemy that you find hard to identify. We live in Leeds, and everybody knows the history of Leeds. The most racist institution in the area is Leeds Education Authority. Everybody knew that. You show you one thing is, we've been here way over 50 years. We have not got a black head in Leeds. 4 years ago, we have 15 black graduate teachers in Leeds, and no school in Leeds have hired one of them. They have to go outside of Leeds to get a job. There is a school in the middle of the black community, and everyone knew that in the 60s. A group of us got together because it was always proactive to get rid of the headmaster because he was very racist. The only school in England, and we as the community got rid of it. Funny enough, a couple weeks ago, they wanted a new head. And I think the most qualified and able black woman applied for the job, and she was overlooked. She's a head in Bradford. She used to work for Leeds Education Department. They couldn't deal with her because she was a very positive black woman. They will deal with a black person who they could manipulate, but they cannot deal with a black person with a positive agenda. And I'll show you how it works. She's a black woman, very positive, not a racist. She wants the best for the underdogs. And she eventually leave Leeds because they couldn't see eye to eye. And I'll tell you what they've done. And you could call that as a fact. When she leave, it took them a year to advertise the job. And when they did advertise it, they changed the job description so that whoever come behind her couldn't go as far as she went. She's a head in Bradford, and then asked him, how come she's a head in Bradford and she doesn't Leeds? But up come a job for a head in Hillcrest, up the road where the most black children go. She applied for the job, but that is something that I'm taking up very serious. And we want some help because they're not going to answers. How come you had a golden opportunity and we turn her down? So she drives from Leeds to Bradford every day. And I'll tell you something, the school that she's head of in Bradford, it's a move way up the ladder because she knows what she's doing, yeah? And the thing is that with Black History Month, with the West Indian Center, and those of us who organize Black History Month together, we're keeping it going. And if you understand, this is why we have an agenda, because we're building up to 2007. Last year was before slavery. This year is the middle passage. And I thank the brother to come and really put some serious issues into the middle passage, because we must know who we are. And we are the only race who seems to lost. A Chinese, 10th generation outside China is still a Chinese. An Asian is 10th generation outside Asia is still an Asian. An African living outside.
Okay, thank you very much for that, but we have to give out our break sometime.
On that note, I'd like to make another contribution. Boots, black blood, cloth, indigo. It was a day like all days, filled with those events. When the official record read, subject appears oblivious to pain. And when we sang in our chains like the sea, the slave ledger read, subject appears oblivious to pain. And when they said, eat shit, and we did, and turned it into fertilizer for farms, their conclusion was the same. SAOTP again. In how many bread lines, job lines, soup lines, waiting our turn, did the subjects appear oblivious to pain? In how many sit-ins, lockouts, knockdown, dragged out confrontations, mutilations, did we hold our peace while the state rained down blows? The bombs exploded, the cattle prodded, goaded, and the sheriff crowed. The subject appears oblivious to pain. And when King was killed in Memphis, and rage bait poured forth from coast to coast across the plain, the aftermath was benign neglect. SAOTP again. And this is not 1865, or 1965, or 1969, but 1991, LA, and we are there, when the third stun gun probe protruded from Rodney King's body, and they continued to beat him with clubs. The police account read, the subject appeared oblivious to pain. And 1 year later, after the 4 white cops were acquitted, and the jury of Rodney King peers went out, erupting in a human volcano, sending all of California up in flame, they still claim the subject appeared oblivious to pain. This is not an easy story to tell. This is not an easy reality to live. This is not an easy time to survive. And is it Frederick coming through the smoke, back ripped open by the whip and the rope, looking for the Union lines? Or my sister Edna's son, Shelan, over 125 years later in Albuquerque, fell by a case of mistaken identity, seeking sanctuary at his own front door. But no, there are no Union lines. There are no safe houses, no clear skies, or stars to stay by, no president either. Only cinders smoldering, pain congealing around the jagged two-edged sword of our citizenship, raking up a rough and guttered road to hoe. No plowshares in sight, not even a roof, jails and streets beyond that fill this fall. So don't talk about what appears to be pain, because who feels it knows it, yeah. And the strain plainly shows as our feelings explode in this land that prefers our blood to our brain, that maintain we are beasts and treats us the same, whose rulers repeatedly bring us to the brink of extinction, denying the truth at the heart of our patience. Their way can't last. It's going down fast. And finally, everybody knows the the deal was rotten. Old Black Joe still picking cotton to wrap and roll. That's how it goes. But everybody knows. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. Okay, moving on now. I'd just like to bring your attention to our artist in residence, Carol Soyenda, and she has a variety of jewelry and paintings and greeting cards, which make very good gifts for the forthcoming season of celebration. Okay, we have Make Poverty History here. Do I believe we have speakers here? If you raise your hand. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll call you up in a little while if you can prepare yourself. I'll just drag you up here now. But something I wanted to say, really, to put all this into context, in terms of us being removed from our history and our culture. We're several times removed, which makes it very confusing, because there's Black British history here, which we don't know about, Black European history, and that includes the transatlantic experience. There's also our traditional inheritance and history from Africa itself, and there's our ancient history to absorb. In our ancient history, going back to Egypt and Kemet, some great things happened. And if you just ponder for a moment on the fact that the world's major religions came out of that part of the world, came out of Egypt. Moses was actually educated in Egypt. What was it about Egypt that created these great truths, these great spiritual beliefs? That's something that I think you have to go into, but have a thought on Kemet. See what you can find out about Kemet, or it was called Kem. And when the Arabs came across it, they put Al in front of it, Al-Kem. And you think about alchemy, there was a lot of that going on, a lot of transformation. That's the seeds of alchemy. And to me, that describes our journey very well. From ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, we have transformed ourselves. They are finding, Black scholars, Afrocentric scholars, are finding links that identify the roots of the spiritual beliefs of various African nations and how it traces back to Egypt and Kemet, with the Yoruba culture in West Africa, in Nigeria, down to South Africa, the Bantu culture. They're finding that their deities and their spiritual beliefs are firmly based in the roots of our ancient history and ancient culture. And we've been separated from that. But I believe we still have it within us. It is there in our spirit. Because we may not have written things down academically, but we carry the living spirit within us. And that's what we use to share and to love each other. And I can feel it in the room today. Okay, so I'd like to bring forward our Make Poverty History speaker, if they'd like to come forward. And we do have to bear in mind, as we were saying earlier, that how slavery undermined the communities and the cultural infrastructures of some very strong and powerful cultures that existed in Africa, which were destroyed. And then colonialism made the richest countries in the world the poorest nations. How does that work? Places with the richest of minerals are now the poorest of nations on their knees. Okay, so if I could ask to make... Oh, okay, they just want a second. So I'm going to rub it on. Transformation is very important in terms of how we transformed these truths into cultural activity. We didn't write them down. We actually lived them through our song, through our dance, through our community culture. this allowed us to live together in very close communities. In our living accommodations, you'd find whole families together, not because there wasn't land there to be developed, but we just knew we could live together in very close proximity. And that's something that's still within us, and it's something we have to fight in this society, when we think how this society actually separates people and divides them. It separates the young from the elderly. It separates men from women. And that's part of the plantation code as well. That's how you get effective workers, is to separate them from what is important to them. And you make the work and the factory and the field the most important thing. And we're kind of in a similar society, and we have to think back to our original values, our original spiritual values, reflect on them, and try to reincorporate them in our lives, because the society we're in at the moment doesn't do much to help bring people together. But I do hope we can think about the issues about the poverty of people in the world, and to reflect on doing what we can. Because as shocking as it is, we're talking about slavery of the past. There are still Africans being sold by other Africans in Africa today. And it does need to stop. Okay, are we ready?
I'm Mary, and I'm from Lake Public History. Do you all, closer, do you know what Lake Poverty History is? Have you heard of it? Yeah. Well, the organization in Leeds that's been doing Lake Poverty History is Tidal. Show me your picture. Yeah. Tidal. And Tidal is concerned, the I in Tidal stands for injustice. And Tidal is concerned with the injustice that is done by the rich white countries to the poor black countries. And what we do is we try to influence the government. We talk to MPs, we write letters, we take petitions, we go on very big demonstrations encouraging the government to improve the rules, the way that it treats the poor black countries, in particular about trade, because the rules of trade are very, very unfair. It means we get richer and others get poorer, and also about debt, because we keep demanding having enormous amounts of debt repaid, which it shouldn't be happening. Right, now, part of trade injustice campaign is the campaign for fair trade, for trade which goes by proper rules, and so that the people who make the things the farmers, the workers, are all able to get fair amount of money for their work. And Patricia is going to talk about that. I'm just going to say that I have a table at the back, and if you're interested in the campaigning side of Tidal, of Lake Poverty History, of writing postcards to your MPs, putting your name on a petition, or coming on a demonstration, I have those things back there. And also, after Patricia has spoken, I'll have some samples, some fair trade samples for people to take away. Okay, Patricia, are you ready?
Yes.
She knew. Do you have any questions? Do you want to ask me anything? You want to hear from Patricia, who's the expert on real fair trade.
Thank you very much. Sorry that kept you waiting, because we were waiting for another person for Tidal, because maybe she will be here any time. Yes. And I'm very happy to be here. At the beginning I was a little bit nervous, because I said I am from Mexico, and I had been living in this country for 3 years. And actually, I have been working in Mexico in communities, trying to work with the communities to help to fight to get a better trade for them. So I hope my speaking is alright for you. If you don't understand, please let me know. I will try to be as good as I can. And at the beginning, I was not so sure, but I feel at home. I feel like I am in Mexico, sharing with people like you and me, trying to fight for our rights. So that's why I am here. And I was invited from Tidal to participate, to promote fair trade. And that's why I'm here. Because I really believe in this, because I have been working in Mexico in fair trade. And it's nothing easy. It's really something that is really difficult. But we are here. It's a shame that you cannot see the presentation, but I will try to be. That's good. What I'm going to talk about a little bit about what is fair trade, some statistics about fair trade, and a little bit of a case of the Mexican coffee. And then try to give you some of the solutions that have been done through fair trade. Yes? Well, what is fair trade? Fair trade is essentially about making trade work for the poor. It's about trying to ensure that the people who make the products we enjoy the fruits of their own product. That's what is fair trade. Yes. And it's something, it looks very simple, but it takes a long time to do it. In practice means a guaranteed fair trade. It's a social benefit for investing in education, health, and welfare of the communities that get involved in these projects. It means trade, support, and benefits. Trade to facilitate better terms of trade and market access for the poor and help buyers and suppliers to find and work with each other. And this is something that is really good. Support to build the skills of local organizations and networks to improve the supply of practical business services to the poor. Influence to determine the barriers that poorer people face in the countries where we work and build the capacity of local organizations to lobby and advocate for change on their behalf. This is part of the work that many organizations like Tradecraft, Oxfam, Tidal are doing to work with these communities in different countries. The main actors in fair trade are from the producer to the customers. There are many people involved in this process. The democratically organized producers, fair trade importing organizations, fair trade labeling initiatives, workshops, and the consumers. We are part of this main process. You as consumers, and also I don't know if you are part of you can be part of the producers. The problems of fair trade. We really live in a very difficult world. It's nothing easy. There are so many unfair things. The reality is that the countries are not equal players, like Africa or Latin America, or many other countries like India also. And more than 70% of the world's poorest people live in rural areas and depend on agriculture for part or all of their incomes. 70%. Just 3 commodities account for 75% of total exports in each of the 48 poorest nations. The share of the South America, Central and Eastern Europe and Africa in total world exports as lower in 2002 than 1960. The poorest 49 countries make up 10% of the world population for account for only 0.4% of world trade. amazing because it's just something that we cannot imagine. In the case of Africa, despite the natural wealth and beauty, is home to some of the least developed countries in the world. The United Nations list of 49 least developed countries includes 34 African countries. According to the World Bank, the number of people living in extreme poverty increased by 75 million in 1990. Disease and famine continue to kill millions of people each year. By the end of year 2000, 22 million people had died from AIDS. Of these, 75% were in sub-Saharan Africa. These problems are exacerbated by ethnic tension, political instability, and corruption. All of this is according to the statistics of the World Bank. This is just one, despite all of this about Africa, Africa is one of the most beautiful countries, and they have been working in this country, and this is just one of the examples of the products that they have been made, and they can be traded through fair trade or another organization. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the case of the Mexican coffee, because it also could be the same case of another countries. Why about the Mexican coffee? Why about the Mexican, or can say that the coffee from Colombia or the coffee from Venezuela? Mexico is one of the biggest countries in Latin America. We are, because I'm part of that, 106 million people. But Mexico is a country that has a very contrast. We have many good things, but also we have a lot of poverty. In the case of the Mexican coffee, Mexico is the 5th largest world coffee producer. And really we don't get so much about this. And the coffee is grown over 690,000 hectares in 12 states, 400 municipalities, and more than 3,050 communities. That means that the coffee has been produced in very small communities, and the people doesn't have the power to negotiate for their products. So they have been fighting a lot to try to build communities so they can negotiate the price for the products. It has been a fight for a long, long time. Until now, they have been trying to form these communities, and they really can negotiate to get a better price for the products. John and I, we were last year in Mexico, and were visiting one of these farmers, and it was really sad, but at the same time was very hopeful to see how people, they can work together, and they work as a community to negotiate to get a better price for their products. Not all of them, they can get this, but at least they are trying to do it. Especially, I don't know if you have been listening about Chiapas, the south of Mexico, and Oaxaca, and the coast of Veracruz. They come from the Indian background, from the Mayans, from the Aztecs. They speak Nahuatl, and sometimes they get a lot of discriminations because of their color. And but now they are trying to work in a different way. So that is why we are fighting for them. And just some of the pictures, sometimes when you have the time to see this, they work in these farms, children and all the family, they have to work together to try to get the back of this brand, to try to sell them. What does fair trade do to benefit the farmers and the communities? The government of Mozambique has set a minimum price for imported sugar, allowing domestic production to complete fair. This has ensured employment for 25 people in factories and plantations and allowed workers to educate and feed their families. Fair trade organizations backed by consumers are engaged actively in supporting producers, awareness raising, and in campaigning for changes in the rule and practice of conventional international trade. They receive their funding from donations of thousands of individuals like you and me to get this money, combined with major grants from trusts and governmental organizations to support overseas projects in Africa, in Latin America, and India. The parents, I'm just going to quote something that one teacher from Peru said about his experience with in the school. Carlos Carranza Fuentes, he said, the parents can't afford to buy books or uniforms. When there is no work, people, particularly the younger, more educated ones, they part and go to work on the other crops. He's referring to coca. They go to work for the drugs people or even to grow coca. The only chance that they have is to grow coffee. So this is the case from Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Mexico. People, because they can grow marijuana, they don't know how to say marijuana, you understand? Or they can grow coca, because it's easy for them, because they get money. So, but they don't have any other solutions. If they could have better price for the products, they would do it. So the good option for them is coffee. So this is one alternative to them. Finally, what we can do? Well, all of this about fair trade is trying to get a better price for the producers, and we can do something. What we can do? We can campaign, we can support, and also we can give. What we can give is our time. If we have money, we can give money, but it's just not the money. We can buy different products, and we have to have the guarantee that every time that we see this logo, is the money go directly to the producers. So that is what is fair trade, what is trying to fight to get a better price for the producers. And just not to have a better price, also they I will pass you some information. It's different kind of projects that different organizations are doing to try to help these communities to produce and to organize themselves and to have a better price of their products. So our invitation is here to tell you that anytime that you see this logo, fair trade, is related with a lot of work behind. It's with organizations, international organizations, and in different communities to try to get a better price for them. Yes? So get involved, buying products with fair trade, with the fair trade logo, fair trade, and also help us to campaign how you can do it. Well, we have here some information also about fair trade. If you want some information, you can have one of these leaflets. we have some information about Thailand. If you are interested about this kind of things, you just give us your number, your name, and you can receive the newsletter to get some information about events and different campaigns, so you can get involved in this kind of things. And another thing, tell your friends about this and try to buy fair trade products. Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry if I but I really am here because I believe in fair trade.
Thank you very much. Could we have another round of applause, please? Truly informative, puts it all into perspective. Of course, slavery is the ultimate unfair trade, but as we're out of slavery, we need different ways for products to be delivered whereby people can be paid what they deserve. And it's really encouraging to know that there are organizations such as Fair Trade working for the workers who deserve the money rather than the investors. Okay. We shall say thank you to Fasua and Gladys, who had to go, but they were doing the drumming when we came in. Thank you to Kwame and to Ras Anansiai, and of course to Rising Notes. And very much thank you to yourselves for coming and showing so much attention. So if we could give a round of applause for everybody. On Tuesday, we gave a minute silence for Rosa Parks, who had passed away the night before. And we've lit some candles in honor of many fallen heroes as well. And we would like to give another minute's silence today to all those people, using Rosa Parks as the headline of that moment. Today we have some singing, hopefully, like we did last week from the wonderful Rising Notes, who were absolutely superb last week. We have renowned poet Michelle Scully-Clark with us, who's going to be coming on after I've done my spell. And we have the men in the kitchen. Somebody, please, take a picture. Take a picture, we have to blow it up on frame. And it smells good in there as well, you know. So anyway, Gary, back to the kitchen. I think I'd rather be doing this job, to be honest with you. I'm no good in the kitchen as well. I can wash up, so I'll be there afterwards. Okay. Without further ado, if there's anything else, should be anything else we should be mentioning. We haven't got the display that we had here about Black British history that was here last weekend on Tuesday because it's been booked out to be somewhere else in Sheffield, I think. But two people on there that I wanted to point out, as I have been doing, is a guy called Alauda Equiano and another guy called Frederick Douglass. Because we're coming up to 2007, which is the bicentenary of the abolition of the slave trade, 200 years since the slave was abolished in England, the trade still continued for many, many decades, but officially the British ended the trade in slaves, and to their credit, also provided a navy to sail the seas and to rescue slaves that were still being kidnapped from Africa and to return them to Africa. I think the British Navy did a very commendable job, but then, you know, there are two sides to every story. There were still people going and kidnapping Africans, taking them to the Americas and to the Caribbean. So Frederick Douglass and Olaudah Equiano are two very important figures in the abolition for slavery. As I've mentioned previously, Olaudah Equiano was born in 1745 in Nigeria, and he wrote a book called The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa, the African. And he was very active before the abolitionist movement. He was very active in helping the black poor and in creating a political climate where it was possible to discuss abolition. Because never before, I don't think in world history, has a group of people or an individual challenged the government of their time on the legalities of slavery. This man did. He networked in his community and he formed a pressure group called the Sons of Africa. So when the Quakers wrote to Parliament in the 1770s, 1780s to request the abolition of slavery, the Sons of Africa were able to write a letter thanking them for their efforts because the Sons of Africa had been trying for many years to lobby government as well. Last week we heard from Rising Notes Amazing Grace, which was amazing. And that song was written by a guy called John Newton. John Newton was a slave trader, and although a Christian, he believed that he could put the two together. But eventually, after many years, his father was involved in slavery as well, so it was just part of the family tradition as well as the country's tradition. Put it into perspective, 80% estimated of the world's population was in slavery in one form or the other. There was slavery in Africa, slavery in all parts of the world. It was just a way for economic development. If you went to war with somebody and you captured them instead of killing them, it was seen as a human thing to do, was to put them in slavery, because you couldn't just capture your enemies and then say, okay, you're free now to live amongst us. That wouldn't quite work. So you would have them as slaves, but eventually they would earn their freedom. They wouldn't be slaves for life, or their children wouldn't necessarily be slaves, and if they were, then there was a good chance that their children would be free. And that was kind of universal. But the transatlantic slave trade itself, it brought inhumanity to incredibly new heights. And it's something that I think we really need to understand, that the transatlantic slave trade was far different from anything that had ever come before. So it's got to be something that we learn from. Also for the fact, what the transatlantic slave trade actually produced in terms of manufacturing and industry and inventions, and it actually fueled the banking system. A lot of the banks that are on the high street today evolved out of the massive amount of money that was coming into Liverpool. So they had to find some way to organize this money. And so a lot of banks and insurance companies as well. Lloyd's Insurance is one that evolved out of the slave trade. And in fact, they made more money on the insurance than they did on the actual trade itself. And it was this man again, Olaudah Equiano, who alerted Granville Sharp to the story about the zone where over 200 slaves were thrown overboard in order so that they could collect on the insurance. The great thing about this man is that he wrote a book about his experiences. And so therefore it put to shame all those stupid so-called scientific theories that they had of, black people's inferiority and the fact that, we've just fallen out of trees. For him to be born in Africa and to be enslaved, and then to write a book without going to university. It says a lot about the African character of survival, endurance, and also obviously intelligence and imagination. And I'll just read you a couple of things that he wrote, particularly related to the middle passage. First of all, I'll just explain again how he and his sister were kidnapped when they were playing a game not very far from where they lived. They were kidnapped by 3 other Africans and taken to be amongst another group of people who had also been kidnapped, and they were chained to this group of people. After about 3 days, Equiano was separated from his sister, so there he was alone, like his sister now, away from their village and away from their family. And after several months, more people were added to the group as they journeyed toward the sea. And he saw the sea and a ship for the first time too. And he was soon put down under the decks of this ship. And there I received such a salutation in my nostrils as I had never experienced in my life, so that with the loathsomeness of the stench and crying together, I became so sick and low that I was not able to eat, nor had I the least desire to taste anything. I now wished for the last friend, death, to relieve me, but soon, to my grief, 2 of the white men offered me eatables, and on my refusing to eat, one of them held me fast by the hands and laid me across, I think the windlass, and tied my feet while the other flogged me severely. I had never experienced anything of this kind before, and although not being used to the water, I naturally feared that element the first time I saw it. Yet nevertheless, could I have got over the nettings, I would have jumped over the side, but I could not. And besides, the crew used to watch us very closely, who were not chained, down to the decks, lest we should leap into the water. And I have seen some of these poor African prisoners most severely cut for attempting to do so. And hourly whipped for not eating. This indeed was often the case with myself. In a little time after, amongst the poor chained men, I found some of my own nation which in a small degree gave ease to my mind. I inquired of these where we were to be carried. I inquired of these, were we to be carried to these white people's country to work for them? I then was a little revived and thought, if it were no worse than working, my situation was not so desperate. But I still feared I should be put to death. The white people looked and acted, I thought, in so savage a manner, for I had never seen among any people such instances of brutal cruelty, and this not only shown towards us blacks, but also to some of the whites themselves. One white man in particular I saw, when we were permitted to be on deck, flogged so unmercifully with a large rope near the foremast that he died in consequence of it, and they tossed him over the side as they would have done a brute. This made me fear these people the more, and I expected nothing less than to be treated in the same manner. He goes on to describe more of what it was like in the slave ship in the middle passage. The stench of the hold, while we were on the coast, was so intolerably loathsome that it was dangerous to remain there for any time, and some of us had been permitted to stay on the deck for the fresh air. But now that the whole ship's cargo were confined together, it became absolutely pestilential. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocating us. This produced copious perspirations, so that the air soon became unfit for respiration, from a variety of loathsome smells, and brought on a sickness among the slaves, of which many died, thus falling victims to the improvident avarice, as I call it, of their purchasers. This wretched situation was again aggravated by the galling of the chains, now become insupportable, and the filth of the necessary tubs into which the children often fell and were almost suffocated. The shrieks of the women and the groans of the dying rendered the whole a scene of horror most inconceivable. Happily, perhaps for myself, I was soon reduced so low here that it was thought necessary to keep me always on deck. And from my extreme youth, I was not put in fetters. In this situation, I expected every hour to share the fate of my companions, some of whom were almost daily brought upon deck at the point of death, which I began to hope would soon put an end to my miseries. Now, can you imagine enduring those conditions from anything between 3 to 8 and 9 months, and then to arrive on a strange land and find yourself up on a block with people prodding on you, opening your mouth, testing your teeth, testing your skin, pulling at your private parts, testing your limbs, and then you were sold and taken to somewhere, found yourself a slave, and then to labor for free for 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week, for the rest of your life, and to know that your children as well would be slaves for the rest of your life. It's bound to create a sense of hopelessness that can easily be passed on from generation to generation. And that's why it's not because we want to get into the gory details, it's because it's important for us to know what we've been through in order to elevate those circumstances and move on with our lives. And so we really do have to pay respect to those that endured all that. And they could have jumped over the side of the ship, they could have committed suicide, as I'm sure many did, but millions didn't. They stuck it out. And because they survived, they chose to survive, then we're here. If they chose not to survive, we wouldn't be here now. So there's a lot of praise to give. And in the struggle to have our humanity recognized, Equiano, Frederick Douglass, Rosa Parks, we can't plan our evolvement as we'd like. Things evolve in a way that is out of our hands. And there may be reasons. There may be reasons why the slave trade happened, and it can never be justified. As a white American cleric, 17th century, in the 1600s, he said, as he was arguing against slavery, he said, just because Joseph was very beneficial to Egypt, it doesn't justify his brothers throwing him down the well. So even though slavery was definitely beneficial to the environment we live in today in terms of industry and technology, it doesn't justify slavery in any way whatsoever. We also have to pay attention to the fact that with industry and technology fueled by slavery, the consequences on the environment has not been added up yet. But I do believe that slavery is a direct effect of the global warming we're experiencing today, because the industrialization occurred on a scale which could never have happened without slavery, and which was unprecedented, never seen before. And the damage to the environment was not part of the calculation. And it's ironic that when we look at the oldest human being was found in Africa, so therefore human beings have populated Africa longer than they've populated any other environment. And when you look at the lushness and the richness of the environment of Africa, I think that's part and parcel with our purpose as we saw it. Our spiritual purpose as African peoples was to coexist with nature and the environment. So things might come full circle where, to get out of the crisis we're in, we may have to look back on the ways and means of which how the first peoples of the planet survived with their environment and a sometimes very turbulent and inhospitable environment, but we survived with it. We didn't seek to destroy it. The struggle to address these issues and humanity is a long history that includes many, many individuals. And sometimes people, like myself, who wouldn't believe that I'd be sat here on this stage talking about these things, but out of necessity, people have to come forward and talk and tell the truth. And these people have been many. Many of them are very unsung. I take, for example, what springs into my head is Malcolm X's father, who was a minister and who protested about the ill treatment that the people in his town in America were receiving. And for standing up and speaking out, he was tied to some railroad tracks. And naturally a train came and the rest is history. And so perhaps you can understand where Malcolm X got his anger from. And that kind of history, particularly in America, and I suppose in the Caribbean, where black people, once they gained their freedom, tried to build their societies. Each time a successful society was built up that put other towns and societies that were white in shame, then they destroyed these societies, either by burning them down or killing the people, or both. As that became reprehensible, a lot more sophisticated, how should I say, tools, actions were taken against black people's aspirations. So even though Frederick Douglass was systematically involved in the abolition of the slave trade in America in the 1860s, no sooner had Lincoln freed the slaves than they brought in all kinds of laws, segregation laws, laws that prohibited black people from voting, prohibited black people from applying for certain jobs, prohibited black people basically from elevating from the circumstances for which people perceived that was our only place in life, which was to serve. And we've always gone against that. And with segregation came lynching, where it was a pastime. I went on the internet the other day and found a site where this guy, to bring it to people's attentions, he collects postcards to remind people of inhumanity. Postcards with images of lynching on the front. And then you write on the back, what a good time you had at this particular lynching. And let's not fool ourselves, it wasn't just one or two people. These lynchings happened regularly in America and the Caribbean. And they were attended by thousands of people, like a football match. And then you buy the postcard, and you send the postcard to your friends and relatives to say this was a really good one. Barbarity exists in all societies. I don't think African people should be saying that we're squeaky clean and we're better than anybody else. By no means. Brutality and savagery exists all around the world. And the good thing about abolition is that it highlighted humanity and the need for societies to focus on human rights. And that's something that we've played a big role in, and it's something that we should celebrate, the role of African peoples in the growth of human rights. And the fact that the Conservative Party want to cut back human rights makes me even more proud of the fact that black people have contributed toward human rights. So here was this woman sat on a bus, hard day's work, fed up, tired. This white man come up now, and she must get up and give up her seat. to a white man. If she had asked her friends, what should I do? They would have said, stand up, just come. Don't make no trouble, we don't want no more trouble. We have enough already. But she'd had enough. And she said, no, I'm keeping my seat. I don't think she knew what that would spark. But it's about, if she was just on her own, she'd have been locked up. We would never have heard of her like we haven't heard of so many millions who protested against wrongdoing, black and white. But this was a special moment, and I'll just read something about Rosa Parks, who died on Monday at the age of 92. Mrs. Parks' refusal to give up her seat to a white man on a bus prompted a mass boycott of buses organized by Baptist minister Martin Luther King Jr. His protest movement brought about the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which outlawed racial discrimination in the US. Mrs. Parks' lawyer said she died in her sleep at her home in Detroit, Michigan. It was revealed last year that she was suffering from progressive dementia. She sat down in order that we all might stand up, and the walls of segregation came down, civil rights leader Jesse Jackson said. He said her legacy would never die, and added, in many ways, history is marked as before and after Rosa Parks. The nation lost a courageous woman and a true American hero, Massachusetts Democratic Senator Ted Kennedy said. Her quiet fight for equality sounded the bells of freedom for millions, he said. Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick said. That's a great name, isn't it? Kwame Kilpatrick. She's an example for all people. For one, I would not be standing here but for her sitting down and standing up at the same time. Mrs. Parks was a 42-year-old seamstress when she made history. On December the 1st, 1955, which is coming up to the 50th anniversary, Mrs. Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Alabama to a white man, defying the law. She was arrested and fined $14. For years before her arrest, Mrs. Parks had been active with local civil rights groups which were looking for a test case to fight the city's segregation laws. Her arrest triggered a 381-day boycott of the bus system, organized by the then little-known Reverend Martin Luther King, and the protest led to the desegregation of the transportation system. Speaking in 1992, Mrs. Parks said of her famous bus protest, "The real reason for my not standing up was I felt that I had a right to be treated as any other passenger. We had endured that kind of treatment for too long." She was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996 and the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian honor, 3 years later. Democratic Congressman John Conyers, from whom she worked in Detroit from 1965 until she retired in 1988, described her as an almost saint-like person. She was very humble, she was soft-spoken, but inside she had a determination that was quite fierce. In memory of Rosa Parks and all other fallen heroes, if we could stand, please, and have a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first artist for this afternoon's celebrations. And I know you're all probably looking forward to the food very much, but I would like you to give as much support to our artist as possible. And our first artist is the highly acclaimed, the published, the renowned Michelle Scully Clark. Can we have a round of applause? And can I just quickly say we also have these booklets by Russ Mansiai, which are give detailed account of his presentation last week, and it's quite informative. Thank you very much, Michelle. Big up.
Big up.
Hello. I'm just going to do a few poems for you today. Alright? Okay. Right, just after what Joe was saying and singing. You know, it sounds like a song to me sometimes. Anyway, so this is called The Sounds of Truth. Sing for our slaves who died for us, who suffered in the trust that we would rise again. Not fight in pain. Drop hate and rise again. My African friend, true Carib descendant, excess deep in your mind, true computer you will find. And in our first millennium, our work has begun, our minds open to lessons that should have been learned before our time was denied. And in our minds and physical strength, we must implement our views which the West took as rules. It's time to pay back our birth dues and lead again the misguided men. My name is Michelle Scully Clark, and Clark is my family. The Clarks, the Bennetts, the Wilkinsons, that's my family. Okay, so this poem goes to them. Do you know why the sea has salt? I can taste it in my eyes, in her rush, in her tide. A celebration in commemoration of a new Caribbean nation. 1948, June 22nd, ships in sailing, promises waiting, 500 baited, their courage, their tool. Self-sacrifices, economic crisis, racist propaganda in a political agenda, power in fear, grains of fact, working to gain, hiding the pain. And you know why the sea has salt? Drops from my eyes. Why we owe our wisdom, our ancestral line. We, the first generation, have to reap from their grind. British black nation, has not our blood bled for British men? 3 generations of West Indian foundation. Government manipulation is not our lie. In the rush, in her tide. If a few is many, then how many is a few? When do we withstand and hold in truth? So with jubilation, I, a product of this mass migration, in the Windrush celebration, I'm aware that the salt of your tears keeps me alive. Every time I do Black History Month, sometimes as a poet, you get called for Black History Month and you think, well, I'm a poet all months. And every month's black for me. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so I want to remember my, we pass. I become a professional mourner, and I want to remember the people that passed. So the first person I want to remember is my bestest friend, Jenny Long, Glenn McGrath. Okay, so this poem's for him. I'm finding it so I don't forget anything, you know, when I read it. You see. You alright? Keep with me, keep with me. And it's called Wake. Now my friend General, yeah, he was the bestest friend, but he was tight. You know what I mean? But it was a running joke with us, you know? When you're friends with people, you learn to accept everything about them, good and bad, yeah? And he always told me never to pay a bill until the red bill came in. Got me into a lot of trouble, that did. Yeah. Okay. Blessings rain, a bittersweet grief, and the photographs pass, a tear-moving picture, and tears falling, heart attack, 'cause you're not coming back, friend. Slow to recover, I feel old before time, and sharp as the weather cuts still your smile, and bills still come in after you're dead. You always said, friend. This one is called Jar God, and people go, why are you saying God, God? But it's called Jar God, alright? By his name. At the top of my mountain, in the covenant of my being, out of body, out of ghetto, out of personal feeling, releasing my aura as my perception grows. You see, the key to my jar is to let others know. We are warriors of Jah, African princess. Bear we his fruit, we are Mother God blessed. Spread his works, immense spiritual quest. Ingrain our children with memories blessed. We are warriors of Jah, no more, no less. We seek with vision, we do our best. We cut the chains of possessiveness, hate, greed, out of control, and we to the field, to the place we must go. Climb our bar, Jah, foot soldiers, lioness. Climb aboard, ship sailing, humanity quest, and feel the aura of being Jah Goddess. African princess, African princess, and feel the love, sister, remove all our distress, and feel the love, sister, put your sisters to the test. Forgive your mother, your father, yourself, and man, be ready for Jah to hold your hand. I'm not even going to count. This is called Mother God. It's my favourite poem of all time. And it came quick, you know? Because what I realised after I was married and had children, I was in the church, and I suddenly remembered that God has a female presence as well as a male presence too. And it came to me, yeah? And within Yoruba and Orisha and everything, Mother God is celebrated, you know? Okay. Sweet as the sweat that lines my baby's neck, lost in the sea of sleep, beneath my dreams, memories awake, to dance the dance of my ancestors' Dance, a colour of movement, a laugh of trance, song of joy, laugh of hope, childlike happiness, no slavery, no hate. Patterns emerging, none of them clear, strangely familiar, reach out to be near and suckle the memories of a Celtic tribe, teaching the rituals of our African pride. And skins merging dramatically from peanut to blue, soul spirits dancing, pronouncing truth from the hue and deep in the center of my triangular soul is locked my vision, my destiny, my role. Lifting her aura, she beckons to me to rock the cradle of her sanity, curious as a virgin, exploring sensuality, knowing as a woman, others follow me, learning the rules of mothering times like ready receptive from Mother God to entwine. Rocking the cradle turns into a boat, thousands are dying, mothers are howling, Holocaust and screaming like my first birth. Millions are lost, generations are hurt. Staring into the boat with deadpan dare, grotesque, imaginary, Africa beware. Hatred in the form of the Antichrist, control, greed, wrapped up in genocide. Recognition of the vision has to be clarified, for to walk with grace, not with snide. Gazing into the face of my Mother God, tears of love fall from her face onto my hands to wash my face, renewing the ritual and finding my place. Little fluid in her tears and senses her eyes, lifting my head, eyes open wide, thoughts of the vision, mentally calm. It's my walk as a woman, it's my talk with a pen, it's 'cause I'm loved by Mother God. Amen. Like I said, I'm a clerk, and my nephew, Daniel Nelson, committed suicide in prison. Last month. And I've just written a poem and I hope it's still in my head. Yeah? Okay, so like I said, I want you to remember. Okay. Daniel dies and the dust rises. Another young prophet taken to his throne. Daniel dies and the dust rises. Another lost hope in the leads of false hope. Daniel cries. Were they all but answered as his rage lay in the turn of the stone? Trying to remember the time Daniel dances when eyes were hypnotized by expressions of hope. Daniel dies and the women gather to cry, to knit, to plan his journey home. Daniel dies and the government panics. Did he have family? How much do they know? As I said, people say to me, this is who I am. You know what I mean? I'm a black woman. This is why I speak. This is who I am. Okay. So I want to leave you with two poems, two uplifting poems. Okay. And the first one is called Today, and it just goes: clear out your closet. This is your closet in here. Everything that comes into us, do we let it out? Do we express it? Do we, It's killing us, people. It's killing our community. The rage, the pain is killing us. Do you understand? Okay, so clear out your closet. Come out or get back in. Empty out your dustbins. There's too much rubbish piled in. Smile in all the lonely eyes and love yourself today. Dance naked in the rain and laugh like you the clown. Share your boat from Dutchy Pot and pull your fences down and sing till your lungs inflate. Feel your story, fill your page. Rejoice and celebrate. Please love yourselves today. And this is the last one, but thank you very much for being a nice audience. Today is a day full of new dreams, aspirations, harvests, hopes and crops for tomorrow. A birth full of experience, a festival of light, dark and shade, and her weathered dysphoria, now a well-worn friend. This journey is her cobbles, she pathed to the very end. And she will pick up the rice seeds to make a bead, a new and old, the same recipe, and the unspoken crowns is upon her head, a breath in which a woman breathes but forgets she has spoken, the binding of her choices and skills in the motion of her children. Today she's as naked as the child who refused to put her clothes on. Today she's forgotten. Today she's free. Today she will pick up the mildew stone with eyes as precious as she. Amongst the soil, the leaves, the rocks, she'll find out what she flees. She is heart of a sea coral, moss on a rock. Medea, Cleopatra, the single mother, raver, sinner, red-hot lover, pleasure giver, storyteller, her story she maketh. The abuser of self and the abused of others, and she's not confused, no right or wrong. For my friends, this journey has no ends. Still beaten, she will challenge. Still hungry, she will feast. Today, she will believe in her crops. Today, she will face the rot for the festival of tomorrow.
Well done, thank you very much. Can we have another round of applause, please, for Michelle Scalita? Thank you, Reverend. Very soulful and very appropriate to what we're celebrating today. Okay, at this point, I must apologize for the fact that we don't have our steel pans. Unfortunately, with it being half term, many of the middle section, I'm told, are absent, and so it doesn't make sense to have the high notes and the low notes without the middle. So I've written a poem which years ago now, and I never do it in public. I've never done it in public, but Michelle has inspired me. It was a poem that was recorded for a community film a few years back, if I can remember it. It came from attending meetings where I was the only black face, and you'd walk into a room and you'd get, well, you still do, projected all this stuff that has nothing to do with you. And, you know, you're just thinking, no, I'm here for another agenda, but other people have their agenda. So I wrote this poem after a very intense meeting. You do not see, you see, not me. My ability to be what you do not see. See me, see what is hidden behind, beside, in front of me, my ancestry, my identity, my destiny. Limit not, do not limit what you do not see. See me. Okay, so we're coming to an end of the microphone section, and the rest will be the food section. But we're going to have rising notes to sing us out. But I'll just say again, just come back to the theme of John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace. As I said before, that he was a slave trader. He had a life-changing incident which made him rethink the cruelties that he had been a part of. And he came back to England and set up his church and preached about the evilness of slavery. And one person that came to see him very privately was a young man of 26 who had a lot of money and didn't know what to do with it. He had a lot of friends, a lot of contacts, and he was a friend of the Prime Minister as well. And this young man's name, he was 26, as I said, this young man was William Wilberforce. And he spoke with John Newton, and John Newton said, well, just pray, which is always a good thing, and reflect, and try to listen to what God is telling you to do. And he did that, and he listened to many of John Newton's services against slavery, and he found his mission. And it was something that he didn't give up on. So I do think that William Wilberforce deserves a lot of credit because he just didn't give up. Year after year, for more than 10 years, he petitioned Parliament for the slave trade to be ended, and then eventually in 1807 it came about. But just to think that Equiano knew John Newton and socialized with him and spoke with him. Equiano knew Wilberforce and spoke with him. He knew Granville Sharp, Thomas Clarkson, and all the other abolitionists as well. And I just think there's just so much about that period. It's an important time because it's almost the first time in history that legally human rights has been recognized, and we have to celebrate that, and we have to celebrate our role in that. So in 2006, we're planning a series of events to build up to 2007, so therefore we can give people information and we can learn things that we didn't know before. And so when 2007 actually comes, we can make it a celebration, because it's very difficult to celebrate what you haven't been made aware of, what you should have been made aware of, but haven't. And so we're hoping that 2006 can be an educational year. If you found out something, spread it to your friends and family, so each one tell one. And hopefully by 2007 we'll be quite clued up, and we can pay tribute to our ancestors as well as celebrate for the future as well. Okay, without any further ado, our last act of the afternoon is the amazing Rising Notes.
Yeah. Rising Notes project, and we're going to sing for you Amazing Grace. We were asked to sing Amazing Grace, and I think after what we've just heard, it's quite fitting. Please, if you know the song and you want to join in,